to all the curious thinkers out there. It's Ellie over here. Hello. I hope you're doing really well. Today, I want to be talking about the hustle. Recently, I did a video on how to spot the difference between a prophet and a guru. And really, it was actually about how to tell the difference between someone who is a genuine truth teller to someone who's sort of sitting in a sea of hustle culture. And hustle culture will define a little bit later in the show. But I think a lot of people already understand the whole hustle culture thing because it is rampant on YouTube or any kind of social media. And a lot of what we see is hustle, hustle, hustle. It's about wanting to, just win at the game of life in whatever way you can and having lots of energy and perseverance to do so in certain ways. People, as a result of that video about the prophets versus the gurus, quite a few people asked me in the comments who it is that I listen to. I don't think it's probably a good idea for me to rattle off the YouTubers that I watch on a regular basis or the people that I consider to be truth tellers rather than, hustlers. And I do have some pretty strong opinions about who I think is just hustling and who I think is here trying to speak some kind of universal, or at least how they understand it to be a universal truth to genuinely help people. I will tell you, I would say that if the entire social media platform is the whole, then a very small percentage of people I think are here probably for the right reasons. It has become just like everything. Hustle. I remember Big Brother, for example. I actually enjoyed, I think I was in Britain when Big Brother first became a thing, that television show, the reality TV show. And I watched episode 1 and episode 2 in Britain. And I actually really enjoyed series 1 and series 2, I think it is, in Britain. I really enjoyed the first series, which was just ordinary people. The second series was very much the same, ordinary people of all different stripes. But then after that, increasingly, it became hustle. It became, wannabe celebrities or whoever had the biggest boobs or the longest eyelashes or the fakest hair or said routinely the stupidest things or was likely to be the most promiscuous or the most risque on camera or, it started to get more and more ridiculous as time went on. It's like that with everything. That's what happens when we have humans involved, is we start off with really good intentions, but then as more people become attracted to whatever it is that has been created with good intentions, it becomes more and more competitive, which means people have to really start to think outside the box in order to be noticed. And then that breeds this hustle. And the hustle then becomes the dominant feature of whatever it was that originally started with good intentions. But yeah, I think there's an awful lot of that. The answer to the question is I listen to loads of different people from very diverse backgrounds and viewpoints. I try to mingle lots of different perspectives together. I listen to the left and the right, to science, to spirituality, to some of the speculation out there and much of the research and facts as well. And I do it on any kind of topic. All kinds of things interest me. I actually would have to say that I'm an equal opportunity listener, except once I start to see that it's a bit of a grift, then I lose interest and tend to move on to something else. And so I'm a bit like that. I just am always looking for that spark of genuine truth. And I think a lot of us are doing that, and we all interpret it in different ways, but that's what we're all looking for. There is a very small list of phenomenal voices. I mean, these are the ones that stand out for me. And as it happens, most of them are dead. And maybe it's because it was a different breed back then. But one of those standouts may sound familiar to you, and that is a fellow by the name of Alan Watts. I just love Alan Watts. He's one of the voices that I will always stop what I'm doing when I hear it and just listen to everything he says. He's the kind of person that you just can't, well, I just can't switch off from. When I start hearing his voice, I've just got to keep listening until the very last word has ended. I can't help myself. Alan Watts has passed. He died young, just like many of them do. He was born in 1915 in England, and he died at the age of 58, somewhere in the 1970s. I think if I calculate on a whim there, around about 1973 or something like that. My math, not so great. He was a very eloquent speaker. So eloquent, in fact. I think he invented the word eloquence and also incredibly wise. And he was another one who I would call him a philosopher for sure, but he liked to refer to himself as a philosophical entertainer. I think he was really understating his presence. In reality, when you hear him, he really truly was up there with the people that I would call prophets, because he was just so incredible. I think I've gushed about him enough, but he is one of the people whose voice I love. And one of the saddest things about a person passing away, which he died of alcoholism and related, actually he had heart failure. It was heart failure he died from, but it was closely believed to be closely linked to his alcoholism. The saddest thing about a person like that passing, especially when they pass young, is because the words stop and you'll never get more unless there's something hidden in someone's attic or basement somewhere that suddenly comes to light. We can only hope. So let's see. I've recently relocated, for anyone who doesn't know, and I've downsized my life in a way. I've upsized my property, I've bought a new home that's actually bigger than the one that I had before, except not really, because the house that I chose, one of the reasons why I love it is it's kind of two houses in one. And I live in half of the area, which I guess would be, like a little two-bedroom house. And then the other half I call the Ellie space. And it's pretty much 50% of the house, which is the Ellie space. And the Ellie space is all devoted to my spiritual nurturing. So everything from here, the office that you see me, or studio that you see me recording from today, this is also where I do my writing as well, because I've got to start picking up on my next book, which I got very excited about, started writing, and then with all the house hunting and everything, it began to kind of dwindle away. Well, once I get my routine back with this channel and also the Tarot Well Done channel, which I'm going to be recording a video for hopefully today as well, then I also have to re-pick up the writing as well, because I don't want to lose my mental momentum. I know what I'm writing and I don't want to lose that. And so I've got to start doing that as well. So I've got this beautiful space for those purposes. And then I also have an artistic space, which is all about painting or sewing or doing any of the crafts. It's the biggest room in the house, to be honest. And it's got wonderful floor space. I could do all kinds of mucky things and it's wonderful. And I plan to do lots of things like, whoops, wrong way, like perhaps create another one of these paintings that I've been doing, or who knows, I just love to work with my hands. So whatever it is that I can get done in there, I'll do. And then also, other space just that is dedicated to my spiritual nurturing and growth as well. And that's one of the reasons why I love this house. So even though I would consider myself to have upsized, I've also downsized, because I'm simplifying a lot in the way that I live my life. But I'm doing it with a lot of heart and a lot of dedication to the future. And so I guess one of the things I've done is I've given up the hustle culture. I don't think I've ever really been a hustler, because there's evidence there in my past that I was willing to forego bigger salaries or willing to forego a lot of the stress in life by choosing a simpler path. And I have done that a lot in my life. So it's not like it's new to me, but I've really made a decision now. I'm going to be 60 next year, and I've decided that the rest of my life is just going to be productive, but very much simplified for my own well-being, spiritually, health-wise, and just in terms of happiness, health and prosperity, which is my little mantra at the moment. The things that are really important to me in life, that's what I'm nurturing. But this hustle culture that I have kind of given up, well, what exactly is it? It sounds a bit like a grift. Hustle culture sounds like a grift, but it's not really. It's about constantly striving for more perfection, more success, more popularity, more ambition, that kind of thing. The hustle is about constantly being switched on. And Alan Watts had an opinion about hustle culture. He considered it to be a type of spiritual confusion, actually, a frantic chase for meaning in life that actually misses the whole point of being alive. You're chasing a bus to get to where you think you need to go, except what you've forgotten is to look at the side of the street that you're on, because the bus that you're chasing is going in the wrong direction. It's a little bit like that. What Alan tells us is that we need to stop trying to strive for things, and we need to notice what's happening around us. He also talked about hustle culture in other types of ways, not using it by name, but in the types of philosophies that he discussed. And he was very much a voice when it came to just how to live life in a way that gives us the spiritual and mental freedom that we deserve as people. And Alan said that life is not a problem that we need to constantly be solving. It's more like a dance that we need to be enjoying, because hustle and that kind of mindset, what it does is it actually confuses the concept of doing stuff with just being. Now, I mentioned in, I think, the last episode that I did here, a fellow called Neville Goddard. And Neville also had a very similar concept. He talked about the concept of I am. He said that every single time we talk about ourselves, we always begin that sentence with the phrase I am. And that's because what I do is not really about who we are. What I am is about who we are. I'm really butchering this. But he links the I am phrase to the God concept. And this is something that I would have to say I would use different words, but I agree with. And Alan Watts, Neville Goddard, and many of the other greats of around about that time, the early to mid, and then maybe even late 20th century, so from 1900 something or other to around about, the 1980s or so, there were a small group of incredible modern philosophers who all had the same perspective. And that was that this concept of our godliness has nothing to do with religion or faith or anything along those lines. It's actually about who we are. And that's the reason why the I am phrase is so important. In order to be, we need to just be. We don't need to do anything, just being. Just to be able to say I am, whether it is I am here, I am white, I am old, I am young, I am man, I am woman, I am, anything. It doesn't matter what. It all begins with I am. And the only part that's really important is the I am bit. Everything else is kind of slicing it up. We often define ourselves quite, mistakenly as being in accordance with what we do rather than just being who we are. And that rather than chasing the meaning of life through some kind of effort, which I have been really guilty of in my lifetime, because I don't like being idle. I like to always be doing something, and I have to always be careful to check myself to make sure that the doing doesn't become the definition of who I am. I need to do because I enjoy being productive, not do because I think it's going to make me a better person. rather than chasing our meaning of life through effort of doing stuff, we should really be presenting ourselves to the world, just being present. And he uses a really interesting metaphor, actually. He uses music as a metaphor in some of his speeches. He says that we don't listen to music for the purposes of getting to the end of it. So we don't have a goal in mind when we listen to music. The whole point of listening to music is to get pleasure from the music, from the sound of the music and the feeling that the music brings us. And he says that we should be approaching life in exactly the same way. Treat it as though it's a song and just enjoy and immerse ourselves in the process of it being, rather than using it as some kind of a target for the future that we have to reach. Like, we have to reach the end of the song. He believes that awareness is where humanity needs to sit, rather than perfection or productivity, and that awareness is our path to being really alive. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that I posted a video saying that I kind of accidentally discovered that for myself when I moved here and had no internet, and really just had to be aware as I was doing little things because I had nothing else to focus on. And that it actually showed me something quite extraordinary that I'm probably never going to go back from now. I will always make sure that there's far more silence in my life than there's ever been before. Definitely when it comes to all the chatter in my ear that I used to live by. I wouldn't say that all the chatter did me any damage, because I'm pretty good at sort of maintaining my composure or compartmentalizing in a way, and I don't know why, I just am. But I had to say I did feel that everything was so much different when I just had nothing in my ear. And definitely as soon as I stopped trying to even resemble anything of a hustle kind of nature. So I want to show you an example of something related to hustle culture that is a little bit unexpected, that's happening in the news right now. This week, actually, it's been happening for a couple of months. And that is that back in August, thousands of the Boeing defense workers went on strike in the Midwest in the US. Really unexpected, huh? They've been on strike now for more than 2 months. And we're not hearing too much about them because, you know, the news is always the same kind of thing going around and around, and there's never any room to revisit something like a workers' strike at Boeing, okay? There's just too much, I don't know, too much of the 5 major stories to just keep talking around and around in a circle for months on end. But yes, they're still on strike. And what they're striking about is the way that they're being treated like cogs in a machine by the elite ownership of their employer company, because they're not cogs, they're humans. And I will say that, you know, I have to put my hand up. I am a former union representative from a previous life, and I've been a former cog as well. I've been a former cog in the wheel. I've worked in government. I've worked pretty high up and in central government. And I've worked on matters that, you know, I've had to sign official secrets acts and things to never discuss them. And it's kind of a double-edged sword there, because yes, you feel very proud of the fact that that you're working in a field where you have to sign this document, but they're also caging you in where you just can't discuss anything. And I realize that now, that you know, it makes you a cog. You have to kind of come to work and keep your decorum and your composure and do the job and compartmentalize and shut down and not think about what the legacy impact might be down the line and things like that, and try not to have too much judgment about what's happening when you get home and you watch your work being discussed on the 6 o'clock news and things like that. You kind of are corralled into a space where you have to sort of go on autopilot and you become a cog. And this is what hustle culture is. It actually diminishes a person because it doesn't allow them to fully be aware and to fully be alive. Instead, they're there to be productive. And they're there to be productive for the purposes of profit. We always have to remember that. It's always about that coin, and it's generally for someone else. The workers are striking because they say that they're not here to produce endlessly for someone else. They deserve dignity and rest, and they need to be really valued because they are complex creatures. They're humans. This is a really big problem in the US. I keep getting my hands wrong. I actually cover it to some degree in my book, Truth Lies in Twilight, The Prophecy, where I'm looking at comparisons between a number of different Western countries in order to clarify some of the detail of a prophecy that I saw in the 1980s, which does appear to be unfolding as we speak and has been for some time. And it's a problem in all of the Western countries, and that's something that Alan Watts actually recognized even when he was young. A lot of what he talked about in his life was the comparison between Western belief systems and theology and tradition, and also the Eastern traditions as well. And one of the problems that he picked up on was that in Western countries, especially the United States being the most powerful of those countries, hustle culture really just diminishes people down to them being a point of GDP. So that's it. They're just measured by their productivity. But it's not just America. It happens in all of the Western countries. It probably happens in most of the world that has adopted that now. But they are defined by their productivity rather than who they are and how aware they are and how spiritually cleansed and nurtured they are. The things that are really important, they're defined by productivity or perhaps image or their perfectionism or their performance or how much they create some kind of monetary value for someone else. And so basically these industrial strikes that are taking place, that have been for 2 months, by Alan Watts's definition, they would be moments where hustle culture is on display and it's actually showing its cracks because people are boycotting it by striking, and they're raising awareness of the fact that it exists and that it doesn't work for humans. So the thing about hustle culture is that it is a trap. And Alan Watts's own life story is an example of how it's a trap. Like I said, Alan was born in the UK and England. He had an ordinary childhood, and from quite a young age, he was drawn to Eastern philosophy and mysticism, even as a child. But he moved to the United States in his 20s and he studied theology. He actually became a priest. I think it was in the Episcopal Church. And he did that for a little while, but his mind kept expanding. And I totally understand where he's coming from because, a couple of years ago or a few years ago, somebody made the mistake of allowing me to read the Bible for the first time in my life in my late 50s. And I read the whole thing from cover to cover and I didn't get it. And so I just kept scratching and scratching and scratching. And what that does is it opens up more and more questions. The more you know, the more questions you have. And now I am listening and binge listening to so much in terms of spiritual awareness, spiritual knowledge, theology, different traditions and mindsets from all over the world. And I can just imagine that someone who is way up there, like Alan Watts, the amount of digestion of information that he must have developed in his lifetime would have been extraordinary. And so it was too difficult for him to remain a priest in the Episcopal Church because it kept him limited and he needed to expand. He found a path towards broader spiritual knowledge and inquiry. And ultimately, he began to find that Western theology was just too rigid. It wasn't realistic for humanity. And it focused on counterintuitive kind of expectations. Western theology is about, it kind of brings things and boils them down to the comparison between sin and salvation, which means that there are too many rules and it's very, very restrictive. But Eastern traditions like Zen Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism or others like it are about presence and interconnectedness and just being. Now that sounds very familiar, just being. The way that Alan Watts speaks, the way that Neville Goddard speaks, the way that Eckhart Tolle speaks, all of these greats, all of these great philosophers, the way that they speak. The thing is, Alan picked up on this and he understood it for what it was, but Alan was also a very heavy drinker. And this is where he starts to connect with his life story and this hustle culture trap that I'm going to be tying up for you in a moment. Alan and in fact his wife also at the time were both very heavy drinkers, and most likely they were both alcoholics, but Alan is believed to have definitely been quite a heavy drinker and an alcoholic, and he died from heart failure at the age of 58, which very likely was as a result of his heavy drinking. The speculations about why he drank, though, they varied. And some people said that he drank as a kind of an escapism because, the burden of knowing so much often, and all of those questions, and the more you know, the harder it is to escape from your knowledge, and you're able to see and perceive things in a different way. Once you understand the depth of things, sometimes it can get very, very burdensome for you psychologically or spiritually speaking. And so some people said that he drank as a way to escape his reality of such a broad base of inquiry and knowledge. But others, including Alan himself and the way he described himself, they say that he lived as an example of his belief of living and being free, to do whatever he wanted. And I think I remember seeing a quote by him somewhere in his 50s where he said that he'd much rather live a short and joyful life where he could just do whatever he wanted and have complete freedom than to live and be an old man who had always been restricted and always contained. And so I guess he got his wish. He also always did correct people and remind them that he doesn't profess to be a saint, and that he's not a guru, and that he doesn't expect to be perfect, and that he's just a man. And he's just a man who's had lots of questions and has discovered a lot in his spiritual inquiry. But his alcoholism was used as a weapon against him. And some of his critics, they pointed to his alcoholism and they said that it was evidence that he didn't practice what he preached, because he was a spiritual person. And so they say he didn't practice what he preached because he was an alcoholic, and that means that he wasn't perfect and he was deeply flawed. But that's my point. He was perceived by his critics to be unworthy of preaching the truth because he wasn't the poster child of perfection. And that's hustle culture. Hustle culture is where you must sit within a certain series of standards, and you must continuously strive for those standards that get harder and harder and steeper, but that is your path towards whatever it is that you see. It's that bus that you're chasing by doing that actually you don't realize is headed in the wrong direction. These hustle culture people believed that Alan Watts wasn't worthy to preach truth because he needed to be the poster child of the outcome, of that destination, that last note of the song when you're listening to music that tells you, that's it. I was listening to this music for that very last note and now it's been achieved. That's it. He was supposed to be perfect, but that doesn't make any sense, because Alan's imperfections were the feature of his philosophy. His truth actually unmasked hustle culture because his imperfections were his truth. What he was stating throughout his life is that you don't have to be perfect to be wise. You just have to be present and aware of what's actually inside the moment. I'm going to give you, a very simple example that we've probably all encountered. Do you know sometimes when you're just feeling low and you're having a bad day and you just want to talk about something horrible that happened at work, or something someone did to you, or something that's unfair, or, whatever. And you pick a person and you tell them how you feel, and they immediately jump onto it and say they want to help you. They want to fix it. Here's some money. Maybe that will work. Or, why don't we badmouth this person? Or why don't we, I don't know, go shopping and get our minds off it? Or, and in a way, you're kind of sorry that you told them, because you didn't want them to fix it. You didn't want them to help you. You didn't want them to have an opinion. You just want them to be present. You wanted to have a witness to how you feel, and the rest of it you'll sort it out for yourself. That's truth. The other person who's trying to get on top of it is hustle. That's hustle culture. They may have really good intentions, but this is kind of a very ordinary thing that happens in life that demonstrates the difference. The person who just needs to speak is the one who just needs presence. They just need that other person to be present as a witness, to listen and to digest and to see and to feel the emotion coming from their friend or their relative or whatever, and to just be present for the moment. But the hustle theory, or the hustle culture, or the hustle vein that's throbbing inside the other person, is a definition that they want to have, that they've achieved something in this moment, that they've helped their friend or their relative. And that's the difference. And I think many people have already felt this enough to be able to identify with that little moment like that. Also, something that is very common in today's sort of political environment is that we often have trouble finding leaders that can move us forward in a constructive way, because we judge them so much on their imperfections. They're either, I don't know, they might be a woman, but they're not feminine enough, or they're too feminine, or it's a man who's a bit of a ladies' man, or they've been a bit inappropriate with staff or something in the past, or they might be someone who's got sympathies towards some kind of a foreign adversary of some kind, or they may have done something a bit dodgy under the table, or they might have a sexist sense of humor. Remember Al Franken? They may have some kind of a funny sense of humor that, doesn't go well, or their racy happy snaps have made an appearance in the public, and now they've leaked out, and now you can see that this person once wore lingerie or didn't with someone. There could be any kind of controversy surrounding them, very minor, very major, whatever. Maybe they didn't toe the party line, or maybe they got caught with a prostitute once, which I think the key in Washington is that they got caught with the prostitute rather than they were with a prostitute. Apparently the prostitutes are very popular in Washington. The key is not to get caught. But anyway, yes, they got caught with one, or they have too centrist a viewpoint, or they're too radically on one side of the spectrum, or maybe they're just too old, for example, like Joe Biden was accused to be. And when you have all of these rules associated with potential leaders, then it becomes really hard to find one. This is hustle culture. This is about not doing it deliberately, but kind of always ending up putting some kind of measurement or requirement for perfection on a person, rather than just being present in the moment of their existence in order to judge whether or not they're suitable. There probably are some incredible potential leaders out there who is redeemable based on whatever imperfections or perceived sins that they have committed. They may still be redeemable, but only if we just allow presence to dictate how we perceive them and how they're accepted. As soon as we let go of the hustle culture, then a person can begin to shine. But the hustle culture is where we expect them to look and behave and do all the right things, all the things we expect. And if they don't meet that requirement, then they're somehow rejected as not being suitable as a leader. And the funny thing is, it's a bit of a minefield because it can be different for every person. So when we have such broad and exacting expectations, it's kind of like nobody is good enough to lead us. And if nobody is good enough, then there's nobody to lead us. And that's when we tend to go astray, because none of us are perfect either. And so I'm left with a question. And that is, what would Alan Watts say about our need for perfection and our need to find and fall in love with the perfect leadership in today's world? And I think that Alan would invite us to stop striving, to stop posturing, and to start just being present, because the world doesn't need more perfect politicians. The American people, the Western world, and perhaps all of humanity, we need our beacon on a hill to be less perfect and more true to self, and certainly more present in the moment. Not just the United States, even though the US is that beacon on the hill that everyone else follows, whether we like it or not. But it is the most influential country. But it's the inside and that moment of presence that really matters. And that's where we're able to see the true light. And that means the solution is always shining there for us to see. The real solutions that come with presence are the ones that are meaningful and have true potential for positive outcomes for everyone involved. But for as long as we're hustling and trying to be perfect, whatever that is, we're chasing the bus down the wrong road, or the wrong bus in the wrong direction. We just need to be present, and we need to be forgiving in order to see the light shining from anyone out there who's willing to lead us. Welcome to the new world. This is Ellie Dreams and Under. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams.